Let's try this again. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give it up for Julian, who's going to be talking about editing the world. Come on.
Okay. Right. Okay, so now that this is working, I'm Julian. Hello. I live in Brighton. I love building editing experiences. I love it so much that I do it as a freelancer. I'm a front engineer. I mostly do, that's what I specialize in, and that's what I get hired for. I used to, still am kind of maintaining an open source library called Draft.js plugins. Who's heard of Draft.js? Hands up. There's a bunch of people. So Draft.js plugins was like different Draft.js components, like a collection of Draft.js components, and I'm trying to hand the maintenance part over to a friend. This guy, I am Sound. Shout out to him. He's been helping me with that so that I can focus on this new project that I'm working on, which I'm about to introduce to you.
What is Draft.js?
I'll get into that a bit more, but yeah, Draft.js is a framework for building editors, like editors for the browser with content editable. But who's heard of content editable? Quite a few, yeah. So content editable has quite an interesting history. It's it's pretty old. It was developed in the 90s. It was developed for front page. Who's used front page? Yeah. So Microsoft were like, okay, this is the web. Now our enterprise users want to edit stuff. Let's slap on a content editable tag, and then they can willy-nilly edit stuff. And let's not bother about a spec at all, because who cares about specs? Because IE was really popular back then, all the other browsers implemented it, tried to copy this stuff from IE, but there was no specs. So what we have now is we have content editable in Safari, in Firefox, in IE, and they all work differently. Meanwhile, the W3 spec has just started. Like literally, it's an editor's draft at the moment. It's getting there, and the future looks good. Future. But to make editors, we've been using this feature, and you can see it everywhere. You can see it in when you write a post in Facebook. That's using Draft.js, by the way. You can see it when you write a post in Twitter. That's also using Draft.js. So there's quite a few that use Draft.js because it is a stable tool. So more about Draft.js later. The problem basically, content editable was supposed to be this thing that lets you edit stuff on the web, but it really doesn't do that much. It does do a lot, but you can't really use it like that because the browser inconsistencies are too large, and also there's no controlled data flow. When you when you edit some text or something, you want to control how it gets rendered, and that's not possible out of the box with content editable. So what you end up always end up rolling your own. And all the tools and solutions out there that use content editable basically implement a document model more or less from scratch. And that also means keeping the selection states in sync. So literally when you select, when you make a selection with your cursor, so like this, keeping this in sync with your with the state that you're editing. It means writing your own document model. It means doing a lot of work to get some basic functionality working. The tools that are out there, these are some of them. They're all very good in their own right, and there's many more. There's also, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of TinyMCE, yeah, loads of editors. What I'll be focusing on will be, rather than just rich text editors, I want to focus on tools that let you build content editors. I'll get into that a little bit more. So, content editors are like editors that, like Google Docs, for example. That would be a content editor, or everybody uses Google Docs, right? Or Dropbox Paper. You guys use Dropbox Paper? Yeah. Hands up who's familiar with Notion? Yeah, got a few. That's a good one. You'll see the. What about Webflow? Yep. There you go. In all these web apps, you'll see content editable tags dotted around. Draft.js is a tool that I've been working with for a while, and contributed to as well. And yeah, it's actively used at Facebook. It's fairly stable. It has an active community. It has a well-written code base, and even has types. So it's a very good starting point, and that's what I've been using for most of my freelance jobs. But there are, like, every now and then, a client asks me for a feature that I can't use Draft.js for, or it's very hard to, it's very inconvenient, because Draft.js has certain limitations. And so I've been trying to roll my own for a while now, and yeah. So here's a few problems with Draft.js. It's very large. It's like a commitment. If you want to use it in your app, you have to go all the way. It's pretty big. It also depends on immutable.js. That's not included in that. In this, by the way. So that's another bundle about that size. It has a complicated and flexible API. It's like the documentation is fairly good, but it's a steep learning curve to get into it. So if you want to have your team, your engineers using it, it's quite a commitment. Basically. So I've been attempting to roll my own framework for this, just to try it out, to see how far I can get. And I'm at my third attempt right now, and this time I got a bit further. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking about it. And it boils down to this. Design problem. Now I didn't study computer science or anything like that. I just have a computer and I type away, and I try to understand stuff. And yeah, so the thing it boils down to is this: updating tree structures. is really hard. There's no native support for it in JavaScript, and so you have to roll your own, and that's really hard. That's really hard stuff to write. I'll give you some examples. So the reason why tree structures is because all of these editing frameworks, like Slate.js or Draft.js or others, use tree structures as a data model. For good reason, because it maps one-to-one with what you want to render. Like say you want to render a table, or you want to render a nested list, or anything like that. As soon as you have something like that, you need a tree structure. If you say, so let's say I want to, this is just an example. Let's say you want to make this kind of editing operation. I want to delete this text, right? If I want to do this, the way I'd implement this with if I had a hypothetical editing framework, right, that I'm writing, I would have to manipulate this data structure that represents the thing on the right, text on the right. It would look something like this. I'd do something like this, right? Then it would be, then it would be parity. But behind the scenes, I'd have to do a lot more. It's like, this is how I'd represent that change, you know? Start index and start offset, and end index would be the index of this child block. And this is what I'd have to do algorithmically to make this update. I have to find the selected elements, remove the blocks in between that I want to delete, update the blocks to remove the text and join the blocks together. I'm just showing you this as an example of how complicated it is to make like the simplest editing operation just to delete some text, right? But the thing is, if I just change the model to, instead of being a tree structure, it's something like text or an array, then I get this super basic, out of the box, supported by all the different JavaScript implementations in the browser or in Node. I get an API for it, and it's called Slice. So let's say I want to do the same operation, right? I want to delete this text. What did I do? Make this into tree. That's right. Now, if I want to do that with a model that is a text model, it's a lot easier. It is literally just this. That's right. Yeah. I just use Slice. It comes out of the box. It's super easy, right? And the array prototype has the same method as well. So I don't need to implement a hugely complicated updating mechanism. And so the first two times let's go back for a second. The first two times, I'm saying this is the third time I'm implementing something like this. The first two times I tried to roll my own editing framework. That's how I went about it. From my experience working with Draft.js and Slate.js and others, I imitated their code base. I used an immutable data library. First I used immutable.js and kind of modeled it sort of after Draft.js. Then the second time around, I used Immer. Have you heard of Immer? It's like a copy. What was it? Copy on write. That's the term, right? Copy on write mechanism. It's a lot far tinier than immutable.js and simpler to use, and you can use basic well, anyway, it's another a different way of treating data as if it were immutable, basically. And the third time round, I had kind of forgotten about this side project, and I was working on a Visual Studio extension, and I noticed how updates were represented like really simply by just a very simple atomic object, and that was only possible because the data structure that you were updating was just text. And so I figured, what if my editing framework was just text? Would that massively simplify an undertaking like this, and would it be competitive? And yeah, and that's why I'm here. That's what I want to talk about. This thing that I'm working on, it's called Zettel. That's where I'm Austrian, where I come from. That's like a slang word for a note. It was available on NPM. It's written in TypeScript. It's really small, currently sub 30 kilobytes minified. It has 0 dependencies, so that's like key for me because, yeah, less complexity. The state module can be used with any framework. So right now the view layer is so tiny. I've tested it out with like rendering it with Svelte, and that seemed to work pretty well. So if I had the resource or people to collaborate with, I think it's very possible to write a layer for Svelte or Vue.js or Angular or whatever. Yeah, maybe even React Native. That would be fun. Changes are atomic, they're replayable and serializable. So they're kind of modeled after this, after what they have in the Visual Studio Extension API. They're just a very simple object. I'll talk about this in a bit. The project is in its very early stages. The only place it's used right now in production is this place, which is Turo. It's James. Where's James? There's James. James wrote the compiler for this, and it's basically a little, pretty big language. It's just maths, and it's cool. Does stuff like unit conversion, yeah, all sorts of things. It's pretty cool. And I'm using Zettel for the view layer. Right, let's go back to this. No, and go away. Okay. Yeah, so don't use it in production. I'm the only one working on it at the moment, although I have gauged interest, and there seems to be interest, and maybe hopefully people will collaborate with me on this. It would be great. There's intentionally very little, oops, spelling mistake, test coverage at the moment because the goalposts are moving. Also, because the data model is so simple, I find it easier to navigate and develop the code base without tests. Like the first 2 times I approached this problem, I tested everything from the start because updating tree structures is so hard. You need to test everything because even the tiniest change in your API can break stuff, and everything goes horribly wrong. It goes up in flames and stuff like that. But because the data model is so simple this time round, it's actually easier to get away with this. And yeah, so test coverage will come, lots of it, when I'm more certain about the design of the API and everything. There's only partial mobile support right now. That's better than most frameworks, just by the way. Because mobile support for content editable is super hard. One framework that does this well is the Tricks editor. Somebody heard about Tricks? Yeah? Yeah, you recommended it to me, that's why you know about it. It's, what are they called again, the company?
Basecamp.
Basecamp, that's it. Basecamp developed it, and they're actively developing it, and they're using a new specification that's part of the content editable spec to address the Android problem. But until recently, that's kind of been out of the question. So the approach, right, minimal testing, we've gone over that. Fast prototyping, I'm just basically trying to work on different prototypes and develop it that way. And the kind of goal for this framework for me is to enable people to build any kind of editing experience, if that makes sense. It doesn't have to be a rich text thing or anything defined. It's literally, that's why I called the talk editing the world. The way this library is designed, you can render any kind of content, whether that's just text or text in combination with any other kind of non-text element. That's totally up to you. It's open source, and you can find it at this address. Yeah. So let's get to the data model. The data model is, when I compared tree structures with flat structures, it's basically a flat data structure. It's an array, a big array. You still need your tree structure to render the document, but that's a separate step. So you never need to think about the tree structure when you update content. So something like this becomes something like this. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, if you don't mind, the square brackets, are they also characters, or are they?
No. So, I mean, that's the very early model, but basically that's how I convert text into a tree structure right now.
So, like, would N be the third character or the second character?
N would be the second. The third.
Third, okay, cool. So, yeah.
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 So it's all stored as a single string, I think.
So it's a string with square brackets in it that then gets converted to.
That then gets converted into a tree structure, yeah.
Cool.
And that below there is the tree structure. And that you'd render out, like if you use React, for example, you'd loop over the tree structure and go render text.
Sorry, Julian.
Yes.
Can you just go back to that? Yeah, the 1, 2. Could you just convert that? If you can edit that, that'd be great. But can you just convert that to strings and arrays, the 1 and 2 above the buttons? Is that meant to be an array of strings and with an array in it?
No, it's just a string. Sorry, I used square brackets, but it's just a string.
Oh, those square brackets can be any delimiter.
Yeah, they could be replaced with any other kind of delimiter.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
So the change object. This is the change object. This is how you change anything in the document. You like insert text, insert blocks, delete blocks, delete text, replace blocks, change the selection, yeah, stuff like that. And I'm going to show you some examples before you can ask any questions about this. This is a naive implementation of the change method. So, given this object that has a start, end, and a value being, say, for example, a string or an array of characters or something like that. It's the slice method again, right? So we just use slice to concatenate our arrays or our strings and update the model. Make sense? And so this is, for example, how we change the selection. So what that would do is, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That'd be this selection, if this were a document, right? Inserting text, so this would insert, oh, sorry, that's still from my previous talk. So that should say hello Brighton. So that would insert hello Vienna at here. Changing, I went back. Replacing text. So this would replace this with goodbye Vienna. You get the idea. Inserting style text, I'd insert the word hi in bold at the third position here. Inserting a new block. This is how I delineate blocks right now in array form. So yeah. Let's keep going. Inserting a custom block. So this would be a custom block. This would insert a YouTube video at free. It would split these two blocks and insert a YouTube video here. Let's keep going. Oh, live coding time. Right. Let's write some code. Let's do that. Not Churro, no. Not now. Let's keep that going, actually. So.
See at the back? Would you be able to zoom in a little bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, I have it open already. So. Yes, absolutely. So here's the. Hold on, can I do that? Make that full. Be sure I can make that full screen. Can't I? Can you see that well enough? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's my base model, and use. So I have two different modules, core and react. React is for the view layer, and core is what we use to update and manipulate the state. It's a nice tune. I like that. Right, so this is how you create an editor state. And then I give it some text and other stuff to configure it with. And then I pass it to my editor component. And where is it? Plain text. And here's my editor. It does all the things that editors do. Just right now it's plain text. So let's move on to something else.
Before you go,
Oh.
Those things. When you're plain text,
Yes.
you type in square brackets.
Square brackets,
Or
yeah.
square brackets, and then square brackets
That would be kind of lame. Or what about, let's...
What happens if you go to bbcnews.com, select half the page, copy it, and paste it into your editor?
Okay. Let's see, shall we? I have no idea. Let's see.
Meaning more obsession.
So right now, by the way, converting HTML into this model isn't supported yet. That's like on the roadmap. But I think what it should do is just...
Nice. Really nice.
Oh, that's good. You're impressed. Okay, cool. Done. Right, so let's move on to this example. So the italic and bold, your basic stuff. Right now I don't have like a floating menu or something like that. It's just via keystrokes and via like shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts.
Can you ask a question, sorry?
Yeah.
The basic model there is just text with like angle brackets and the square brackets and the lines. So where the styles live externally to that or somewhere else?
So I mean, this is kind of like the prettiest model. There's different models. I take this. This is kind of the model that I want to serialize and put on my server. Right in my head right now. That's how I designed it. And then when you convert it and make it into an editor state, the way this actually looks like, I can show you. It looks like this. It's an array, and every character and the beginning and the end of every block is an item in this array.
But it's still a flat array. There's no tree structure.
This is still a flat array, and then this gets used to produce the tree.
Right.
Can you see this? Okay. So this is the tree. The tree. What's going on there? Oh, there you go. This is the tree, the blocks. The blocks are a list, and they can contain, every block can contain children as well. Yeah. Right, so this is how you do, this is how I manipulate the editor state to toggle a specific style. So here's bold, italic, and underline. Does underline work? Oh yeah, it does. There you go. And here's how you render a style. So it's pretty unconfigured. You configure it yourself. You render everything how you want it to look like. That's completely within your control. And it's all defined here. It's fairly straightforward, I guess. There's a couple of if statements, and depending on which style it is, we render different tag. Right? Any questions about that? No.
If you wanted something that was bold and italic, given that you've got different states there, how would it handle both?
Right. How do I show this best? I think it's in here. That's right. Let me show you. So what it does. does is that's when you convert the list of values into a tree structure, it like converts text into text fragments, and how that looks like is it groups characters in lists of characters into fragments. So if something is italic and the next neighbor is italic, it groups that into a fragment. If it's italic and bold, it groups the nearest neighbors that are also italic and bold into a fragment. Yeah. So that's that. And it's also recursive. So if there's like two styles, that will call the render style prop twice. All these render props, they're just components, so they can be. You can use the React API to optimize those components with use memo or whatnot. Yeah. So that's that. Here's an example of block styling. It's very basic, but you get the gist. It's also not very elegant right now, the implementation of this, but so, and not very readable, so I'll skip over that. No, let's just show it, just for the sake of it. Oh yeah, here you go. Here's my render block. If it includes a H1, I render H1. If it includes a H2, I render H2. Otherwise, render a normal block. Stuff like that. And this is how it looks in as a model. Right. So let's get onto the more interesting stuff. So this is a tree structure. So you can have however many levels of nesting you like, really. And it's fairly simple to render this as well. Where is it now? That's where I have this open. Here it is. So here's how that is, how the text model looks like, the text version of the model. And here I'm rendering it, and that's all, really. And I can edit this like any other text element and undo it. And yeah. Because, so this, in my previous versions, and also, so this isn't implemented in Draft.js right now, because it's hard to implement with tree structures. It's kind of a piece of piss with text structures, because the model itself doesn't know that it's a tree. So really, all you're doing is you're editing flat structure. Right, that's something that I'm working on, but that's not done yet. Here's a fun one. That's because you completely control the rendering. You can use it with other React components. You know, whatever you like. It will still work as expected. I think that's kind of cool, right? Yeah. So like, also it doesn't presume that you're using HTML either. You're just rendering React components, so React elements. So that could be SVG, for example. Yeah, or anything really.
Have you tried it with SVGs?
Yes, I haven't got a demo ready yet though. It works. Yeah, it worked. This is all stuff that's like totally new to me because I haven't seen any of the other frameworks do this yet, so it's pretty exciting. And I tested this in Firefox, it works. Tested it in Safari, it works. Yeah. So what's next? Time travel. Oh yeah, here's again another thing that was super hard to implement in my previous 2 attempts, and that is very complex in any of the other frameworks I've used too, is history, editing history. And that's why Draft.js, for example, uses immutable JS, because it makes copying state cheap because of linked lists. And Slate.js does the same thing, by the way. But because we have our change objects, making changes is super simple, and recording them is super simple, and replaying them is super simple, and potentially sending them over the wire, for example, for collaborative editing, is theoretically super simple as well. I've started reading up on it. I could say I started reading some papers. But it's more like glossing over and looking up the references of papers on Wikipedia and stuff like that. And it looks doable. So there's like one implementation of collaborative editing. I think it's time-based or something. Like it depends on in which order you insert you make the updates.
Yeah.
And that one would really fit this model quite well. So anyway, let's make some. This is just some plain text. And down here you can see the history of the document, and you can go back and forth, do some time traveling basically. And this is super simple again. So I've got my timeline here. What I'm doing is I just recursively, like, I have an undo stack and a redo stack, and in those, in the undo stack and the redo stack is my changes, and I can use them to reverse a change. So every time I enact a change, I record the reversal of that change. Is anyone interested in how that's implemented? Yeah. Shall I go over it quickly? Okay. I think it's here. I think that's it. Yeah. So what I do is basically you get a change object, and then as the reverse, so this should actually be called reverse. Let's call it reverse. So the reverse change, what you do is you figure out what have I. So if I like replace this with t, then the selected value. This selected value is this bit, right? And then the start and the end position is this bit, isn't it? It's this. No, it's this. There you go. It's like end minus selected value length plus value updated length. So yeah, this is the reverse, and then you can just use that change object again to reverse the change, and there you go. Yeah. So let me show you one more example. Just to show this in action, kind of. So, right, I'm tasked with, like, a client comes to me, says, we want Markdown. Markdown now. And all I have to do is go change my render function. Done. Now I want page 2. Okay, no problem. Now I want page 3s. Okay. And I also want, what else is there? Didn't quite hear that. H4s. Let's say I want this, like a HR. Yeah, no content at all. So, super simple. Well, that's going to be 2. Let's do 3. Yeah, 3. And let's do. Actually, let's say this is. There you go. So this still works kind of like text. So if I go back, I'll see the text. I could use like a markdown parser and render markdown in there. That would work too. It's all up to me because the render methods are it's like inversion of control. And what's in here is the functionality that lets you select text and edit text and synchronize the selection, etc. So yeah, there's also, I mean, this is an example of images. It's not a very good one. It works. Yeah, I'll keep working on this and adding examples and stuff. The roadmap, Android 2 support, Android support with level 2 input events, like Trix does. That's what I'm looking at right now. I bought a Pixel. Got it here. Yeah. I'm really struggling to get it to work with the Chrome debugging tools. Yeah, there's so collaborative editing is something I'm keen on. There's like, again, that's another thing that doesn't seem to be doable with any of the other frameworks out there, or not built in from the start anyway. browser testing, I want to, so that I can, as a team of one, make changes and not break everything all the time. And because there's so many browser inconsistencies, that'll be really good to get that done. And then alternative view layers, so like Vue.js and Svelte and Angular, would be great to implement too, and fun. And then the last thing that I have got on there is performance. So what I've been looking into is, obviously, if you have very large documents, at what point does it become a performance problem? I've been trying to work on optimizing this, and then got fairly far, but then decided that it was too big of a commitment too early on. Optimizing. Well, what is it? What's the saying? Premature, evil stuff. You know what I'm talking about. But so it turns out arrays in JavaScript are really fast now, and there's also possibilities of optimizing the manipulation of arrays, like chunking arrays and stuff like that. The main problem that comes with the root cause of performance problems is basically when you have a large array and you manipulate it, you have to create interim arrays and therefore allocate a lot of memory to make that update. Does that sort of make sense? Yeah. So that's that. And that's it. Thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch, please do. This is the GitHub repository. If you want to check it out, there's some instructions on there on how to run it locally. As I said, right now it's not ready for production, but I'm actively working on it, and I'm planning on adding documentation and more examples, etc., etc. Questions?
Since you've got your the tree structure represented by start and end blocks, so in your class string, how do you stop that getting inconsistent states? How do you stop deleting a start but then now you've got some in the end? Or do you not stop that and then deal with it fine anyway?
Sorry, how do you stop getting inconsistent states?
So you've got you've got start block, bit of content, another start block, nested content, end block.
Yep.
If I delete that second start block, you've now got one start block, two end blocks.
Yeah, it doesn't let you do that. It throws an error. It goes meh.
But if I'm in the editor and I just drag my thing between those, does it have something where it works out? I need to delete first, or
you can't really delete end delimiters in the editor because they're not visible. You can. Oh, and that's a lie. So hold on, say that again.
It might be better if I draw it out later on.
Yeah.
You've got your square brackets.
Yeah.
And there's some opening square brackets and some closed square brackets. And the consistency of your data model relies on the fact that those opening and closing balance. So how do you make sure that it keeps balance? Are there any editing operations where you can just delete one opening bracket but not a corresponding closing bracket?
Yeah,
or
so
the other way around, closed bracket without...
right now, if an editing operation results in an invalid state, the change method will just refuse. So that's still something that I'm considering. Do I have something I've been playing around with having functionality that automatically consolidates. So it says, well, you deleted a start delimiter. I need to delete the corresponding end delimiter. That would be one way of solving that, right? Right now, it just goes, no.
That's a reasonable approach.
Yeah.
So, sorry, because I was going to ask exactly the same question. So, in the current version of the editor, you're doing work before you do the change to make sure the change is valid.
Yeah. So I basically just count the amount of start or like the amount of delimiters that you're inserting or deleting.
How does it handle square brackets in the text content? Is there like an escape character or?
Normally, because you don't actually, the square brackets you only see when you serialize the model into a thing that we will save on the server, like a JSON like friendly thing.
So if I type square brackets, so your string, does it include the square brackets or does it include something else? Or is that just something that you won't actually see?
No, so the square you mean how does that work if you?
How is the square bracket in my text so I can see? I'm editing text and I write some square brackets.
Yeah.
How is that
Represented in that serialized format?
Yeah.
Ah, right. I haven't gotten to that actually. I'm gonna be honest, that's like a hole. Sure. I haven't written the serialization part yet as well. So yeah. That's another thing.
You're able to type square brackets into the editor.
Yes, you
It
are.
didn't break the layer. So
No,
it must
because-
be represented somehow.
Yeah, because that's a different model. So the model, there's the like model where you have where square brackets represent delimiters of blocks, and then there's the model that gets used in the editor state itself, and the square brackets were just a way of making it super easy to write test cases right now. So yeah. Okay, where should we start? Yep.
So at the moment you're using content editor.
Yep.
How are you syncing the changes which the browser makes in content editor into your intermediate?
Right. I don't. I interrupt every event that happens. So every key press, everything. And well, apart from when you move the cursor, that I synchronize with my model. But every event that would result in an editing operation, I re-implement with my editor state, basically. That's unfortunately the only way you can control the beast that is content editable. Otherwise, Firefox would, I don't know, do this, and Safari would do that, and Internet, and wow, different things. Different things. Yeah.
Have you thought about how you're going to represent more complex structures like tables and lists?
Yes. So I actually already had a table that was like, because that's been my main problem and the main thing that clients have been asking me for. So how you'd represent a table would be like this. Let me show you. Tree. Index. You'd go. So that would be cell 1, cell 2. Then that would be grouped in a in a block, then you'd get cell 3 and cell 4. Does that make sense? No?
How does it know that's a table and not a load of nested?
Oh, you need to render it.
paragraphs?
Yeah, like you still need to define your rendering yourself. So I could try and do this now. But it would take me a couple of minutes.
You annotate every cell and tell it that it's a cell, and every row and tell it that it's a row, and every table and tell it that it's a
Yeah, so the way you can do that is, so this is one way to create a model, but that's just for readability, right? The other way would be, the thing is, one of these characters, let me show you my types. So a block start delimiter can contain other data. It can contain metadata, and like even, for example, if you want to display a YouTube video or a table, you could say it has a style of table or an entity. An entity can be arbitrary data. Entity. Yeah, an entity can be an arbitrary like object with stuff that you put in there yourself that you then can use for rendering. So you can ascribe objects to characters. If that makes sense. I wish I had an example to answer the question, really. I did, but I don't anymore. I will. So if you keep in touch with me, I promise I'll get it to you tomorrow.
I have one follow-up question. Do you have any trouble with multi-byte characters like long emoji with string splicing?
Yes. No, well, yes and no. So right now, that's one thing that's on the roadmap as well. Right now, what I do is... Oh, I completely screwed it up. So, it's broken. That's something that I'm implementing at the moment, is composing strings. It doesn't have any problem with rendering multi-byte characters, but the insertion of composed characters that's a bit tricky right now.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Before I ask the question, you have spent a lot of time on making the software, so you can edit different text formats. I can see some improvement. But my question, it may be silly, but it's a basic question.
No question, silly.
How many hours you put in this? What is the advantage you get? When you get more money, or what exactly you get a benefit out of it? Because
that's a good question.
You have some work. Apart from work, you're working on this, or what exactly? How would I see this one?
Really, I don't know. I do it because it's an interesting problem and I like doing it. And also, there's this side project that I'm working on together with James that I want to be badass and awesome, and I want to use this thing for. It's really like it's like when I was 5, I used to play a lot of with Lego, you know, and I didn't do it for money. Same reason.
Were you getting cheated?
Sorry?
You were getting cheated. Did you get paid for that? For Lego.
No, I said I didn't do it for money.
I was saying you were getting cheated. They were holding back your wages.
What were you get? What you get? What? No, I was getting wages for mowing the lawn and stuff like that.
Does anyone know what time we normally stop? Sorry. Should we do one more question? I've got one as well. I don't want to be greedy.
I might have misunderstood the answer earlier. I was going to ask how you persist the draggable into that long. Are you saying currently you can't reconvert the original string from your array model back into the starting format? Or
Yeah, that's right.
okay.
So I'm also like not wedded to the starting format. It might just, but the reason I thought it was the starting format was going to be, well, first of all, it's easier to read. It's shorter. It takes up less room. So yeah, I might still use it. I'm not wedded to it though.
Isn't that the advantage though? Like, you said that the starting format is just a string and you can slice that string up.
Yep.
Like, and that's really powerful.
Yep.
So, isn't that the advantage in this implementation over?
No, because because array has the same characteristics. You can use the slice method with arrays as well. So I use the same thing basically. So all the updates, the editor updates, are done with the array.
Okay, and that's just one great big long linear array, isn't it? It's not
Yeah.
a tree of arrays.
That's right. It's one big array. Yep. And if you have, that's the thing. So it actually works quite well, and I've tried it with fairly big documents. And even then, there's a threshold that you go over, and then it gets slower, and that's just because when you make those updates, you have to create temporary arrays, and those are fairly large. So if you could, for example, chunk these arrays, then you wouldn't have that problem at all. And you can make this performant.
I'm going to butt in now and say, I don't know about you guys, but I thought that was absolutely fascinating. So please, a massive round of applause. Thank you.